Welcome to Flowcast, the podcast for the life of the world by the Dominican Sisters of Springfield. I'm your host, Sister Karen Freund, and today, in honor of the 150th anniversary of the founding of our congregation here in Illinois, I am interviewing three sisters about some of the changes they have seen in life and ministry over the years. I will let our guests introduce themselves.
I'm Sister Marcelline Koch. My hometown is Mount Sterling, Illinois. I entered the community in 1959.
I'm Sister Mary Clare Fichtner. I come down here to Springfield from Michigan, Richmond, which is northeast of Detroit.
Sister Judith Anne Haase. I'm from Crystal Lake, Illinois, and this is my 60th Jubilee of Profession.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask each of you a question about what drew you to become a Springfield Dominican. So you can jump in wherever you want to on that.
When I think about that, it's not always what, but who for me. And of course, for all of us, I think God called us here and drew us here. But for me specifically, I had our sisters in school for 12 years. And it was those relationships that drew me to our community. I always felt a calling for something more. And here at Sacred Heart Convent in Springfield is where that call went for me.
Thank you.
Interestingly, I also was taught by the Springfield Dominicans for all but 2 years of my 12 years of schooling, and noticing the differences in the communities. I was taught by 3 different communities in those 12 years, and there was something about the Springfield Dominicans. They were joyful. They were, I'm going to use the word normal, I don't know what other word to use, but they were just easy to be with. They understood us. They were a lot of fun.
Similarly, I had experience with 3 different religious communities. 2 of them were Dominican and one was St. Joseph Sisters. I was always attracted to the religious life. From the very first sister I met, I wanted to be like her. Much to my parents' dismay, I chose to come down here to Springfield because there were several Dominican congregations, a couple anyway, in Michigan, and they would have liked me to go there. So it was definitely the charism and the behaviors of these sisters that gave me the strength to be stubborn enough to come here.
I think it's very much like meeting someone that you're going to marry. You just know the right person. You know the right congregation. Well, I've given you a couple of questions to reflect on, and so why don't you pick one that you'd like to say something about and speak to it?
I'll be glad to start.
Good.
I have just recently come to the Mother House after a very insightful mission called Cor Unum on the right here in Springfield. It's a ministry to young women in the world who want to develop themselves spiritually and socially and even professionally. Most of them already have a profession. I got to live in the house for a while that provided them with first during this pandemic, it only just provided them a Zoom space, but then they have been able to come to the yard and into the house recently. So there's so much I can say about that experience, but the big thing about it is that I feel very strongly that they are showing us a picture of women, at least, and perhaps men too, of the future of the world and the church.
Thank you. Sister Judith Anne?
I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the memories that I've had. I remember on my first mission, the great camaraderie, relationships, community that the sisters experienced. We supported one another, and I think that flowed over into our ministry. I think, when I think that Jesus sent out his disciples 2 by 2, and I think St. Dominic also did that, I just see the importance of our being part of a community. I did live alone for 9 years on 3 different missions. And, as I look back, I think there was a lot missing from my life during those 9 years. And one thing that I do want to mention is my first year teaching, I was with Sister Mary Clare. She was teaching 6th grade for the first time, and I was teaching for the first time. And so we got together and prepared lesson plans and so on. And we had the students challenge one another. I remember one time the kids in my class made a paper airplane with the challenge written on it, and we went over to their room, opened the door, and threw the plane in. And we were challenging, I think, to a mission competition, mission collection competition. And I think that and some of the experiences at Marian are working together, doing dishes together. The community really has been speaking to me, especially as I look back at the lonely years.
When Sister Clare was talking about 𝐻𝐬 𝐋𝐚𝐬𝐭, and I think about our community, changes not only in our community, but in religious life too. We were initially focused solely on education. We did some health care, and then we did pastoral ministry. And my passion has been around social justice, and so that in more recent years has been a connection for our community. And so what it says to me, how we have embraced the gospel, especially after Vatican II, that was really a significant piece, that we embraced that gospel for the sign of the times. So what you describe, Sister Clare, is a sign of the time to be present to young women in our church. And even if it isn't that they are going to join our community, but how can we help them to be better disciples, you might say, in the church and have a place in the church? Judith, you were talking about, that whole community piece. As I think about over these years, community life has always been important, and it's changed in some ways. Do you remember back in the 70s and the 80s when we practiced communication? We had lessons in it, and it was true. It was our changes in the community go along somewhat with society. But we learned how to dialogue with one another and share ideas. And it took us a while to be comfortable with that. And we are comfortable with it now. We still have many things to learn, but we do share with one another, so that deepens that community life. We share ideas, we share about ourselves. And I think that's really important.
I think you're pointing out something really significant. It isn't one part of our life that makes us be Dominican women. It's all those things working together. So you've named, without any prompting, those 4 elements of Dominican life: common prayer, study, and service or mission. And those have evolved over the years. So how do you categorize some of those good memories that you have of life in terms of those changes? How have you grown into common life, common prayer, study, and service?
I don't know if this is exactly answering that, but I think it just occurred to me, I think what we Dominican women have done has to claim our preaching charism. And that certainly has made a difference in our lives. In a sense, we can't not preach formally in church, but we preach in a lot of ways. We see us preaching, yes, with words. There are times that we can do that. but also just, we use the expression, preaching from the pulpit of our lives. I think that's a pretty significant piece for us. The other change is how we see obedience. I remember when I entered, obedience was doing what somebody told me, in a sense. And we have really grown into seeing obedience as that listening. And that listening, it comes into even decisions about our ministry, that listening and sharing, which I think is a very significant part of not just our life, but the life of the church. The life of God's people is how do we listen to one another?
I think as a result of Vatican II, our preaching has expanded. I think of the ministries that we had when I entered, basically health care and education, with maybe a few people doing something else. But now, through obedience, through our being able to consult, dialogue with our religious leaders, we can think about where is God calling us? How can I use my talents, the gifts that God has given me? How can I use them best? And I look at the areas where our sisters are now working, such as Englewood in Chicago, the American Indian Reservation out west.
The mountains of Peru.
Oh yeah, everything in Peru. Our sisters who are working in Harpa, our sisters who came from La Arroya and who we worked there for so many years. There are so many opportunities, and that is preaching by what we're doing, the relationships that we're forming. And we have the opportunity to do it.
And I have just recently come to what some people would call a retirement house. Some people in the convent kind of hate the idea of retiring because we entered a life, and you don't retire from a life. It's like telling people that they're retiring from matrimony when they become 70 or something like that. Anyway, despite that problem with the word, the reality is that life is very different. The focus of life is very different. And I think most of us that are here want our focus on prayer to be extremely helpful to the world, and also to our sisters that are still out there in the trenches doing the day-to-day work in different missions. We can still talk about it with each other, and we have been. Just in the short time that I've been here, I've been finding out from people what books they've been reading, what authors have given them good insight into prayer or into self-development or into concern for the most vulnerable people of the world. And all those conversations, they're brief. Most of the time we have them at the table during dinner, and we eat with different people. Whoever we happen to be next to in line to get our lunch, that's who you end up eating with. It's not like we have special seats at the table where we all sit together. And so we have conversations with each other, and that is a great source of reflection for the next prayer session that we have, probably alone, like in the afternoon. You take time now to pray in the afternoon. And the prayer is not a recitation of words or formulas. It's a deepening listening to what I've heard for the day. How was that God's voice for me? What about what that person said is unique and deep and gives life, that life that is holy and spiritual? So that's where we are, all of us old sisters that are working together at the Mother House. And some of the most profound sisters are the ones who are very incapable. Like if you take them for a walk in their wheelchair, it's amazing what beautiful thoughts they have by just seeing a bird or a flower. And it's a great gift to us that are pushing the chair to have that thought for the next couple hours.
That's a wonderful summation of that, Claire. And I think I just want to echo something, and maybe you can talk about it a little bit more amongst yourselves. The retreat that we had recently with so many different people who are working, we had a different sister each day who was working with a group of people who are marginated. And the thing that sticks with me after that is the notion of Jesus calling us to be one, that you may be one. And those people are frequently left out of the equation when you start thinking about that. So to really notice people, I said to the sister who spoke about being the director of a shelter for immigrant women, you humanized the people that you described and talked about. And that's what's missing in so many of our political discussions of what we should do. So have any ideas like that floated around in your heads?
I was on that retreat, and one of my takeaways was to look at those people who are on the margins, to look at them as people. I had found myself looking at their exterior and maybe being turned off because they didn't look like me or they didn't look like the way I thought they should look. But I came to a realization that the people are human beings, and to look at the beauty of their inside, and I'm just hoping so much that when I come in contact with people with whom I had a difficulty relating, I hope I've changed.
I made that retreat also. That retreat touched in me something about the work that I do, because I do our Office of Justice, and so it connects me even more so. I would want to say for our purpose here that retreat came out of our prayer for the life of the world, which was the result of our last chapter. And one of the phrases in that is about attention to the rostros concretos. In Spanish, it's specific faces, but there's a connotation with that the rostros concretos are the people on the margins. And the people that are not looked upon as being like whomever else is looking upon them. And we tend to do that in many different ways. So in our anti-racism work, we make a community agreement when we're going to talk about racism because it's a difficult subject. And one of the things we say in the agreement, we used to say, respect has to be a part of our conversation. But they've changed that to say, affirm the worth and dignity of each person. Because sometimes folks can say, well, if you respect me, you won't make me uncomfortable. And that's not what it's about. So it's always, how do I affirm the worth and dignity of whomever I'm with? And you're right, Judith, that retreat, in sharing those experiences, the sisters who did it, they were affirming the worth and dignity of all the people that they share about. In our society, it's really easy to other people. And I'm using quotes around the word other. And how do we stop putting people at the edges and at the margins? It's a real call, I think, in our day.
I've learned a lot recently, like the last 15 years, of the value of working with lay Catholics especially, but even just lay people that are concerned about the world. And we're doing more new work now in the community with our work with the associates, and the anti-racism work is one of them. They're actually, some of the associates are gathering in groups to decide how they can work in it. That is going to be a great gift to the sisters that work with them, because it's going to renew their own commitment, their own recognition of how they can be more accepting.
And I think what both of you, all three of you really, are coming to is how does that support Pope Francis's envisioning a synodal church?
Oh, yeah. Oh. I think all of these ways are, that listening word is important. To listen to others, to hear their stories, and to validate their stories. When someone tells you, this is what happens to me, and you can say, oh, I don't think so. I've never experienced that. We have to listen and to allow other people's stories to be true. We have to validate them. And I think that's part of the synodal process, that we do that. What we're trying to do in our work is to bring folks in and bring folks together. And so that understanding of others, I think, is a key to the synodal process.
Well, okay, I'll just add to that one of the things that I discovered at a workshop that I was just on Zoom this past week was the value it has been to us and to the people we're working for that we have a community.
I was thinking also, as far as an example of the synodal church in our community, when we are asked maybe how we would like to contribute to ministry. Simple things about community life, like the schedule, prayer experiences, time of prayer. To me, we are practicing being a synodal church here in community.
Mm-hmm. We also, I think, do that in how we govern ourselves. Right now, anyone who wants to be a delegate to our general chapter, which is the decision-making body of our community, can be. And also the consensus building that goes into our chapter and to its deliberations is a synodal process for sure. It's not handed down from above, except that God hands it down, but in terms of people.
Okay. Well, you have had wonderful contributions to make, and I certainly thank you for your participation in this. It's always risky to put yourself on the line like this. Thanks so much to Sisters Marcelline Koch, Judith Anne Haase, and Mary Clare Fichtner for joining me today. These sisters shared stories of how God works through, with, and in our ordinary relationships for the life of the world. Did you know it is those words, for the life of the world, that give this podcast its title, Flowcast, for the life of the world cast. You will find all our episodes at flowcastlisten.org, where you can subscribe to receive each week's episode in your inbox. There in the show notes, you will find much more to enjoy. Finally, a big thanks to the Flowcast team, Sister Beth Murphy and Brandon Durham. I'm Sister Karen Freund. Thank you for listening, and God bless.